Hello there. In 2010, a shocking case occurred in Guizhou Province, China. A resident of Baiyuan village owned a dog. One day, the dog went out scavenging and brought back some spoils as usual. However, what was unusual this time was that the prey it brought home was a human arm. When the police intervened and shed light on the case, the identity of the perpetrator shocked everyone. Let's delve into the story right now. One afternoon in 2010, Mrs. Li, a resident of Baiyuan village, saw her golden dog fighting over something with several other dogs. Out of curiosity, she approached to see what it was and was horrified to discover that it was a blood-soaked human arm. She quickly called her husband, Mr. Zhu, to come and see. When Mr. Zhu saw the bloody arm, he was equally shocked and initially thought that their dog had killed someone. In a panic, he threw the arm into the bushes in the forest. However, after calming down, Mr. Zhu realized that something was amiss. His dog was usually very gentle, and even if it had bitten someone, it wouldn't have been able to sever an entire arm like that. So, where did this arm come from? Mr. Zhu pondered this for a while and finally decided to report it to the police. The police immediately came to Mr. Zhu's house. Forensic examination revealed that it was the left arm of an adult male, but the back of the hand had been gnawed by dogs, making it difficult for the police to determine whether it was a criminal case or not. They could not rule out the possibility that it was a rare accident, where someone's arm was severed in an accident and then found and chewed by the dogs. To uncover the truth, the police decided to investigate and survey the area around where the arm was found. However, their investigation yielded no useful clues. No one had gone missing in the nearby villages recently, and there were no reports of injuries or fatalities. The investigative team then took a closer look at the severed arm and found that it had only been recently cut off. The skin on the hand was also very soft, without any calluses. In other words, this person had never or rarely done hard labor. Based on this, the police deduced that the owner of the arm was not a local. If the person was not local, why did the arm appear here? The only possible answer was that the person had been dismembered. If this was indeed a dismemberment murder case as the police suspected, the top priority would be to search for more evidence, including other body parts, the murder weapon, and the perpetrator. The police then mobilized a large force to conduct a comprehensive search around the village. However, due to the mountainous terrain, the search was very challenging, and after a whole day, they still found no clues. Continuing the search this way seemed hopeless. At that moment, Police Chief Liu had a bold idea. Since the dog found the arm, perhaps it could lead the investigation team to the victim's body. We all know that dogs have a keen sense of smell and can find items based on their scent. As soon as Chief Liu proposed this idea, his teammates fully agreed. To get the dog to cooperate effectively with the police, they intentionally kept it hungry all day. The next day, as soon as it was released, the hungry dog immediately ran towards the forest to find food. The police followed its trail to the 171-kilometer mark of the Guiyuan Highway, where it entered a dense forest beside the road. If the hypothesis about the dismemberment murder was correct, it was likely that the criminal disposed of the victim's body along this road to destroy evidence. The police began searching along both sides of the road and the dense forest. Soon after, Mr. Zhu's dog brought back a large piece of flesh. Forensic results showed that this piece of flesh was a human thigh. Moreover, the freshness of the flesh indicated that it had been cut off about 3-4 days ago. Based on this evidence, the police confirmed that it was indeed a dismemberment murder. After confirming the nature of the case, the investigative team conducted a more thorough search of the forest. Eventually, they found 2 bags containing many rocks. After DNA testing, the police determined that these rocks were from the same source as the arm previously found, all belonging to the same victim. Unfortunately, the head and torso of the deceased were still missing. Without the head, identifying the victim was much more difficult. At that moment, a police officer had the idea to use the fingerprints on the victim's hand to find new clues. This was perhaps the only feasible method at the time. The technicians immediately took the victim's fingerprints and entered them into the fingerprint database. Surprisingly, the fingerprint comparison went smoothly, and the results showed that the victim was Liu Dangshun, 45, from Zhongshan County, Liupan Shui. The victim had a history of drug addiction, so his fingerprints were already in the police system. After identifying the victim, finding the murderer became much easier. The police immediately set out for Liupan Shui to investigate Liu Dangshun's social relationships. According to police speculation, usually, the perpetrator of a dismemberment murder is someone familiar with the victim, as there would be no need to go to such lengths to dispose of the body if the murderer were a stranger. Therefore, it was very likely that Liu Dangshun's death was caused by someone close to him. The police quickly found a suspect, but this suspect made them ponder deeply. The person in question had a very close relationship with the victim. He was Liu Tanggui, the victim's older brother. When this news broke, the entire village was shocked, because Liu Tanggui was usually very amiable with everyone. How could he be a murderer, especially of his own younger brother? What was the motive that drove him to act so ruthlessly against his own flesh and blood? Where did this family tragedy begin? According to Liu Tanggui's testimony, he is 47 years old and runs a consumer goods store. He has 2 obedient sons and a very happy marriage. Every time he mentioned his recently deceased brother, Liu Tanggui became extremely agitated. He said the grudge between the two had existed for a long time, not just 1 or 2 years. In the past, he cherished his younger brother very much because, although Shun was quiet, he was hardworking and ambitious. However, everything changed after Shun discovered he was infertile. Shun felt his life had lost all meaning and was continuously ridiculed by fellow villagers, causing him to become increasingly aggressive and easily provoked. Not only did he often beat his wife and children, but he also started hanging out with bad friends, gradually sinking into drug addiction. From a hard-working, honest man, Liu Tangshun became a drug addict. However, he always longed to have a son, so he asked his brother Liu Tanggui to let him adopt his nephew. Naturally, Gui firmly refused. Firstly, because the child was old enough to understand many things, and secondly, because Shun was increasingly falling into drug addiction. If he let Shun raise his son, he feared the boy's future would be very bleak. Liu Tangshun was, of course, not happy about being flatly refused by his own brother, and even held a grudge. He had no children and was despised by the villagers. Now, even his own brother did not trust him enough to let him raise his son, so Liu Tangshun gradually gave up on everything and began to spend money recklessly. Eventually, he ran out of money, and, to finance his gambling, he started deceiving others. Shun not only treated his neighbors poorly, but was also unfilial to his own parents, occasionally yelling at and beating them. As his older brother, Liu Tanggui couldn't stand seeing his brother fall so low, so he went to his house to try to advise him. However, not only did he fail to persuade him, but his younger brother also chased him away with a knife. The story of the Liu family having a younger brother chase his older brother with a knife quickly spread throughout the village. Everyone wanted to avoid Shun, fearing they might get involved and encounter trouble. Despite everything, they were still siblings, and Liu Tanggui couldn't bear to see his brother fall into such a deep abyss. Therefore, he put his brother into rehab, hoping he could change. But Liu Tangshun's willpower was weak, and he couldn't quit drugs. Nevertheless, Liu Tanggui didn't give up and continued to take good care of his brother. When his brother was unemployed, he even took him into his home. Unfortunately, Gui unwittingly raised a viper in his bosom. Shun not only failed to be grateful, but also took advantage of his brother's kindness by doing shameful things to his wife, Tang Da-shu. In December 2009, Liu Tanggui had to go to Beihai, Guangxi for business. When he returned home, he found his wife mentally unstable. After repeatedly asking, he learned that his younger brother had taken advantage of his absence to violate his wife, and even threatened Tang Da-shu not to tell anyone, or he would kill her. Upon hearing this, Liu Tanggui was struck like lightning. He thought about reporting it to the police, but ultimately chose to endure it, because after all, it was his own brother. Good things should be shared, bad things should be hidden. But Gui's tolerance only made his younger brother more unmanageable. Previously, Shun still had some fear and only dared to violate his brother's wife when his brother was not at home, but he became increasingly shameless and reckless. On January 9, 2010, Shun took advantage of his brother Liu Tanggui resting at home to harass his sister-in-law. Tang Dashu immediately screamed, and her husband, hearing her scream, rushed out. At that moment, the younger brother was lying on top of his wife, forcibly trying to undress her. Seeing this scene, Gui could no longer endure it. He lost all reason and repeatedly struck his brother's head with a hammer until Shun's brain splattered out. By the time he calmed down, it was too late. Gui started worrying about how to handle the body. After some thought, he decided to dismember his brother's body into many pieces. Once he finished, Gui buried his brother's torso and hid at a construction site near his house. He then drove to Guizhou, 80 kilometers away, and discarded the rest of the body by the roadside. However, less than a week later, the police came to Liu Tanggui. Faced with police questioning, Gui admitted his crime. The police also found Shun's head and torso at the location Gui had indicated. The case was finally resolved. Gui was arrested, but no one in the village hated him. On the contrary, they sympathized with this unfortunate older brother, because everyone knew how well Gui had treated his younger brother. They understood that this crime happened because Gui had lovingly and thoroughly helped his brother, but the younger brother had been ungrateful and committed shameless and despicable acts. Therefore, the villagers even raised money for Gui, hoping he could live better in prison. The case has been closed, but the concerns of the relatives as well as the observers of the case are still there. It is true that Shun lived irresponsibly, was addicted, and ungrateful, but it is clearly wrong and completely illegal for Gui to have killed someone because of that. It just shows that in a fit of rage, anyone can do something terrible. Although Gui's crime had its reasons, he still cannot escape the fate of imprisonment and will have to serve at least 20 years in prison. It is truly regrettable that he had to sacrifice his entire future just because of an unruly younger brother. Therefore, one should live responsibly, steer clear of bad habits, and learn to manage one's own emotions, and try not to let them rise excessively to the point of losing oneself and leaving behind regrettable consequences.